So what we're going to do is we're going to run through an icebreaker just to get everyone. So we're going to do our name, our pronoun, he, she, or they, where you're from, which public sector or local authority you're talking about, or even where you're physically located. And the question this time is, my best bus stop is. So we're returning to bus stops, and I thought my best bus stop is was an interesting little icebreaker to do. Then we'll go through the agenda, which is we're going to run through the outcomes from how precisely and accurately we know where a bus stop is, and also some of the outcomes that came out of last time with coaches. There's been a couple of little things there. We're then going to talk about Street versus Schema and how we should handle the differences that come up. And then we're going to talk about what's missing to allow us to do this and how we're going to handle when there's a conflict between the street and the schema. And then Adrian and Sarah are going to take us through the roadmap and give my voice a rest. And then we're going to run through we're going to have some feedback on the roadmap, and then we're going to have some feedback on the whole process. And we should be done in 2 hours or so. So this is fine. Strap on in. Everyone should hear me speaking. I'm just going to quickly, I will assume Sarah and Adrian are keeping an eye on the chat. Right, so I'm going to bring up the list of people. We're going to go through alphabetically because there's only 16 of us, or 17 of us now. So I will go first, and then we'll just go through to the next person. So my name is Dr. J. I use they as a pronoun. I'm from ThoughtWorks, and I'm working for Department for Transport as a service designer, business analyst, hand wavy type. And my best bus stop is the one at the end of my street, because it takes me into work, it takes me into town, and because I live in Elephant and Castle, it's stupidly well connected, and I in fact have 2 bus stops at the end of my street that can take me to pretty much anywhere that you want to go in most of central and most of South London. So Adrian, you're the next victim up. And it looks like Adrian's having building work done and has stepped away for a second. So we'll go to Carol next.
Hi, I'm Carol. I work at the Highland Council in Inverness. She and probably my favourite bus stops are the ones over in Skye with sheep gates on them.
I do. Oh, I like sheep gates. I like a good sheep gate. Yeah. Gillian, you're the next one up.
Hi there, Gillian Watson, Fife Council, based in Glenrothes. Pronoun she. I'd say the favourite bus stop is the one at Kenway Shops, which is just round the corner from the house, and the one I've been using most frequent.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gillian. Mark Hodgkiss, you're the next one up.
Yeah, Mark Hodgkiss, Cumbria County Council, he, him. Favourite bus stop, probably Lowood on Windermere, because it's a great view on a sunny day across the lake.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Thank you for that. James Lawson, you're the next one up.
Hi, I'm James. I'm he, him. I'm from North Lincolnshire, and my best bus stop is the one outside my house because it takes me to the pub and home from the pub very regularly.
Very nice. There's nothing like a nice pub-to-pub public transport.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. Josh Goodwin, you're the next one up. I think you might still be on mute, Josh. Give you another second. Okay, we'll come back to Josh. Katrina, you're then the next one up.
Hello, I'm Katrina, and I'm working with Department for Transport on the NaPTAN project as a content designer. I'm based in Edinburgh, but actually my favourite bus stop is down in South Devon in South Hams. It is the bus stop known as Coronation Cross at Tuckenhay, but everyone knows it as the Maltsters Arms, which was the pub that used to be owned by Keith Lloyd. So.
Nice. So Next person up would be Keith Willis, who's just joined us. Keith, we're just doing intros. So name, pronoun, where you're from, and what's your favourite bus stop? My favourite bus stop is?
Sorry, Keith Willis, he, him, whatever, from React Accessibility, and I know Three Bridges, because it's a train station close to me.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Sorry to put you on the spot just as you joined. Kelly Donnelly, you're the next person up.
Hi, I'm Kelly Donnelly. I work for Transport Scotland as a business analyst. Pronoun she, her. I don't have a favourite bus stop, but now hearing that all you do have a favourite bus stop, I feel as though I should do some research into finding one. So if I ever meet you again, I'll let you know what it is.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Richard Bassett, you're the next one up.
Hi, I'm Richard Bassett. I'm from Translink, and my favourite bus stop is one that exists, has a name on it, but the passes you can find. So it could be anyone.
Thank you. I did have a bit of trouble catching you there. Your sound was cutting in and out slightly, just to let you know. Adrian, we're going to run back to you because you missed out on doing your introduction at the start.
I've got someone helping in the house at the moment. So hi, my name is Adrian Falconer. I'm a he, him. I am the product owner for Department for Transport for the redevelopment of NaPTAN. And yeah, my favourite bus stop is the one outside Tooting Broadway station where you can catch 15 different buses. That's quite a useful bus stop.
It's almost as many buses as I get to choose from my bus stops.
Yeah, I feel spoiled.
I think we are spoiled in London for the number of buses and the frequency of them. Roger Court, you're the next one up, I think.
Hi, Roger Court, he, him, Kent County Council. And I think my favourite stops are, we have a few villages with medieval streets which are incredibly tight, and the pavement is about 6 inches wide. There's a couple of stops shoehorned in that exist literally as a flag and a case on the wall of a pub, just flat. And I think I like those just for the brevity of them.
I do appreciate the just sticking it on the wall. Sarah, you're the next one up.
Sure, yeah. My name is Sarah Al-Adley. I'm Head of Data Management, Department for Transport in the Developing Data Unit. Pronoun she, her. Favourite bus stop? I know you've got me thinking now. But definitely the one outside my house, which is just down the road. It takes me all the way to Manchester or into Bury, or indeed to the pub in Whitefield that I like to go to.
Very cool. I love the fact that most of us like the bus stop that's closest to us. Sharon Hobbs, you're the next one up.
Hi, Sharon Hobbs. I'm from Translink, she, and I'm going to be a real rebel here and say I switched from bus travel to train. So my favourite train station is Lisburn.
I love a rebel. Thank you for joining us, rebellious one. Sindhu, you're the next one up.
Hi everyone, my name is Sindhu and I work for Durham County Council. I'm a she, her. I think my favourite stop would probably be the one outside my housing estate. Yeah, well kept. It's got a very nice pavement just behind it, which I often go on walks for with my children. Yeah.
Nice. Sophie McKenzie, you're the next one up.
Hi, I'm Sophie McKenzie, she, her, and I work for Transport Scotland, so I'm a graduate transport planner. And I can't say that I have a favourite bus stop. I don't use the bus so often, and I'm mostly walking.
That's completely fine. I was worried you were going to say I drive everywhere, and it was going to be completely the outlier for the public transport meeting.
Yeah, no.
And Tricia, you're the last one. I know there's been a few people come in, and I'll give a space for anyone after Tricia if you want to do introductions. But Tricia, it's your turn.
Hi, I'm Tricia Wright. I'm the Facilities and Information Officer at Nottinghamshire County Council, pronouns she, her. Favourite bus stop? Well, Adrian actually got to experience my passion about bus stops, and I've become a bit of a geek. I don't know if it's because not only do I manage the data and information, I actually manage the maintenance and the installation and everything of them. My bus stop is actually in a small village called Ratcliffe-on-Soar. It's a very old stone brick shelter, but the floor and part of the wall has a mosaic mural on there that's very picturesque.
Oh, nice. I almost now want to go and travel and see this bus stop. I think Aidan, Alison, and Bowie. If any of yous would like to go, I'll give you a couple of seconds to do an intro. Okay, right.
Bowie, it's Ben Murray. I'm using my my personal Teams account. Didn't know it come through as Bowie. Hello, Ben from Bods. Very bus stop. I'm not sure, but I am kind of thinking just to add something would be I like the idea of areas, bus stop areas. So that's something where you can hail or demand some transport from like an appropriate area. So that's probably something. And where I live is probably where I'd like that to be. So where I live is my favourite stop.
Thank you, Ben. And can I just double check? I didn't catch your pronoun. Which pronoun do you prefer?
Oh, he, him. Thank you.
Fantastic. No problems.
Thanks,
and I
Joey.
see that Alice.
We'll remind you of that in the Pods Tech Tuesday next week.
Yeah, there's a few pseudonyms I use that you might be able to spot on different types of social media platforms. I'll try and guess what I use on Discord sometimes.
This is going to be fun now, especially as this is recorded and going up on YouTube. There'll be people hunting Bowie. So, just a reminder of the agenda for everybody. We've done intros and welcomes. We're going to quickly go through the outcomes from the last couple of workshops, and then we're going to have a look at Street Vs Schema. And just talk about where the differences are coming up, what they actually are, and we'll play around with some of the differences and talk through them, but also how we're going to handle them. What are the ways forward when we bump into them? And how do we see them differently as producers and consumers? And then I'm going to hand over to Adrian and Sarah, who are going to take us through the roadmap for NaPTAN. And then we're going to have a little bit of a feedback session and just ensure that these are all good and useful and sticking to what people need. So very, very quickly, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page with the outcomes, we had some outcomes from precisely and accurately, how do we know where a bus stop is? And one of the things that we confirmed was that everyone's delivering eastings and northings to the correct precision of a metre by a metre square. And we concluded that the best point to measure a bus stop was from where somebody needs to stand to catch a bus. So I know that over the years there's been different points that people have suggested, like the flag or the shelter or something like that. But we were all discussing around the passenger experience. So when we start, if we have to do any remeasuring or moving of bus stops, we're going to measure them from where a person needs to stand to catch the bus. We're also at DFT also looking into questions about how we do the translations from eastings, northings into latitude, longitude, or for those who are more technical, OSGB 36 to WGS 84. Conversions. We're still talking through exactly where this should go, and hopefully this will be covered in the roadmap. Meanwhile, if you need to do any calculations, there is an ordnance survey tool which allows you to do this, and that's the tool that should be used, and that's the tool that we will be using to create any conversions when we do them or if we do them. Does that make sense to everybody? Is there any questions about that? Fantastic. And then when we did coaches, or the problem with coaches, or more precisely coach stops last time, we came up with a couple of small distinctions. So I just wanted to be clear. A coach carries multiple passengers on the road, and the difference between a coach and a bus is on a coach, A driver is responsible for loading and unloading the luggage, the passenger's luggage, and there is no distance limit on a coach route. A bus carries multiple passengers on the road, and the passengers are themselves responsible for loading and unloading their luggage. And there is a distance limit on a bus route, which I believe from the comments was 50 kilometres. I couldn't convert that into miles because I can never remember how to do it. But it's which was an EU imposed limit on bus routes. And we know that there are some bus routes that actually have a break in between, in the middle of the route, to allow the bus route to meet the distance requirements. One of the big outcomes from that workshop was that both coach references and the 900 centrally managed coach stop areas are no longer required. They're not being used by anybody, and we will withdraw that data from NaPTAN. So it's still in the old NaPTAN, but we've not migrated across into the redeveloped new NaPTAN. Is there any questions or concerns about that before I continue on? Fantastic. So getting into the depths of what we're talking about today, the street versus the schema. Now, I've got one really good example, but I know there's a couple more, and if you think of another example, we'll put it up. Hail and ride stops are down in the schema as being not marked. However, we know that some, in fact, most hail and rides within London are marked because there are markings on all the lampposts in the hail and ride area saying that this is a hail and ride area where you can wave your hand and stop the bus. So this is a marked hail and ride, which if we put it in the schema like that, would flag up against some business rules as being invalid because hail and rides in the schema say that they shouldn't be marked. So I wanted to discuss these kind of things where the street and the schema don't quite match and get an understanding of, just beyond the hail and rides, if there's any others that you can think of that come up in your districts and in your spaces where you're having to mash something into the schema to make it fit because it's not, because the schema doesn't allow you to represent accurately what's on the street. So what I want to do is I'll turn on the timer and I'll give you 5 minutes to put up any thoughts you've got on this. If you think, hey, the street and the schema match perfectly and this is a non-issue, let us know that as well. So can everyone, hopefully everyone's been able to get into the mural board. Everyone understands how to put stickies on, and if you've got technical troubles putting stickies on, keep a note and you can call them out when we go through and do the reading through of the stickies. So let me just turn on a timer for 5 minutes. There we go. Off we go.
5 minutes later.
And that sound, as if you're on an airplane, says that we're done. Hopefully everyone's finished putting their thoughts up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through them, and we'll see how it all goes, and we'll take any comments. So just put your hands up or something like that. So we've got the example, which is hail and ride stops, which are marked on lampposts, can't be represented in the schema. And there's somebody else has seconded this, no distinction between marked and unmarked hail and rides. So you can put a hail and ride as a marked area, but it will fail some of the business rules that Eto World and other places have in place to check that everything is conforming to the schema. The next one is bearing artifacts are a problem, but not strictly a schema issue. Cases where the actual bearing doesn't conform exactly to the calculated one because of odd street geometry. So this is where, as far as I understand, the street turns one way, but actually the bearing is slightly different. And because we've only got the 16 points of the 8 points of the compass that's being used, it doesn't take much for the bearing and the direction to be slightly off. Is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly what I meant there.
Oh, Cool, excellent. I was just wanting to make sure that I'd completely understood it. One of the questions would be, what's the best way of solving that? Is it to allow more accurate bearings, or is it to be softer on the bearings, or is it just there are some streets that are always going to be a bit whiffy?
That might be a reflection of the bearing at the midpoint of the line representing the street, but the street then changes direction, so the bearing is actually for either for the majority of the segment or the midpoint of the segment, and not the segment of the road that has turned.
Right, and this is going to be particularly more difficult when you've got longer segments and not just a point bus stop, but you've got the flexible areas and the hail and ride areas. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess it depends. How was the bearing generated? Was it the centroid of the line, or was it? Yeah.
Let me just put a little note there. I think we need to go into bearings. Needs more work, more thinking. Because I understand why they're useful, but I think we need to do just a little bit more tightening up around what the bearings actually should be and how they're used. The next one, not being able to change stop type from BCS to BCT. So BCS is bus coach stop and BCT is a bus coach larger stop.
Bus and coach
terminal?
station. Bus and coach station and bus, coach and tram, which is the on-street version of the stop.
Right. So in
it's a
cases of
historic
error.
issue mainly. Yeah, we've got a few which are just bugging the daylights out of me. They were set up, 15 years ago when NaPTAN was new. People didn't understand the distinction between BCS and BCT. And so we have some on-street BCSs and we have some BCTs sitting in bus stations. The SMS code has been printed on the flag. People have been recognizing that stop for years. And of course, they're deeply embedded in the route and timetable data. The simplest thing to do would just be to swap the stop type. But of course, you can't do that. You have to completely retire the stop, create a new one, create a new flag, assign it a new SMS code, and then take the old stop out of all of your services and put the new one in.
So I have a question. And is this a technical limitation in your system that you can't change a bus stop type, or is it a limitation you found with NaPTAN?
It's a technical limitation in every system that we've used to maintain NaPTAN, so I've assumed that it was a business rule of NaPTAN.
Okay, I went through the 130 something, 37, 36 business rules that I could find in the system, and I couldn't find one that said you couldn't change bus stop type. So let's have a discussion later. We'll take this one offline to have a look at the different systems and see why you can't do the sensible thing and change the bus stop type to fix an error rather than deleting the stop, because that sounds ridiculous. But I also understand people want to keep things sane and stable. Keith, hopefully you're going to tell me that your system allows you to switch bus stop types quite easily.
Well, not from a user interface, because of what you were saying. Basically, once it's done, it's out there, and everyone's used it down the chain. So if you change it in NaPTAN, we could change it in ours in the back end, and it could be erected the flat in the front end for the user to submit to the DFT. But then the DFT needs to know that it needs to change that over. You might not change NAPTO code or NaPTAN code or certain things once they've been done. For instance, you wouldn't change a NaPTAN code once it's been done, or a NaPTAN code, but it's down the chain. Then you've got to tell all the people for the publicity, for travel line, all that, to change those things as well. So it's just been a common rule, I think, that once it's done and submitted, you shouldn't be able to change it without going to the DFT and that whole big chain. So yeah, it's not a limitation of the system can't do it. It's just been, as Roger says, a business rule, so to speak, that once it's done, it's done.
Okay, to me that's a business rule that I think we should go and have a look into as to how sensible it is, especially with the way that the new system works, where what somebody gives us, we take as being the golden data. We don't, DFT is not overarching or correcting or changing any data that's being given to us. So I think that's an interesting one to have a look at, but also how we can publicize using the API any changes of bus stop type, because I think people being stuck with the wrong bus stop types in places and having incorrect data is something that is worth figuring out how to fix. So I'll put that one down as another one of how to change bus stop types needs more thinking. How to change bus stop types.
I think I would add that
today.
I would be very, very wary of just allowing a free change of NaPTAN point type, because that opens up a whole raft of possible errors where somebody changes a bus stop into a ferry terminal entrance, for instance. This is just an edge case that's been irritating me for years, because whichever temp set these stops up in the first place didn't understand the difference.
Absolutely, and let's have a look at what stop changes and how we should set up that process. One of the processes that we need to look through is how to do an archiving process now, and how stops can be archived so that you can remove them from your systems. One of the things about that also allows us to do some of the ACTO code splits that should have happened ages ago, but we had on hold because of all of the movement with the NaPTAN data from one system to another. And this is another process that we will need to sit down and consider as to how it should be done. Keith, is that a legacy hand that you've got up there?
Yes.
Fantastic. Right, let me move across some more. The next one is BCS cannot be on street and HAR cannot be marked. So you can't have an on-street bus and coach station. They're all held in an off-street bus and coach station. But I know that there are a couple of people who have on-street bus and coach stations. Is that correct? Or are they on-street because of oopsie mistakes?
We have on-street bus stations.
So yeah, because Tricia, I thought I emailed you about these because somebody raised a question on it, and I thought it was you that I emailed that, and your actual on-street representation is a bus and coach station that is on the street.
Yep.
But you're not allowed to mark it as on street because the schema says no, this shouldn't exist. And you've also do you also have some Helen rides that are marked that you can't represent?
No, we don't have those.
It's possibly only TFL who does it that way. I'm sure there'll be somebody else who does it. So the next one is bearing and road names do impact on flexible zones, aka demand responsive areas, the FLX stop types, and are flagged up on passenger as an error.
That was me.
Somebody help me understand. Can you help me just understand this one?
So a flexible zone is where our demand responsive transport goes to. So we have fixed timetables where they'll operate a fixed route between A and B, and then offer flexibility between B and C. So a flexible zone, you kind of draw a polygon round a village, and we tend to put the centre point where the shelter is, just to say, wait for your bus at this bus shelter and it'll turn up. But in the schema, the schema actually does say that you don't necessarily have to put a road name in, and the direction indicator is just set as default north. And I have sent many quotes of the schema to passenger, and they still argue that I should be putting the bearing of where we've put the pin on the map, even though it's not. It's a zone, it's an area, it's not an actual stop.
So this is one of the next questions that I've got, which is what are the things that as producers and as consumers of the data, where there are problems and where there are these conflicts in trying to understand the difference in viewpoint, why passenger would find that an issue. Because it sounds like you've provided all of the data, so why are they finding it an issue?
Yeah, I mean, I could put that centre point anywhere I liked, but we just tend to use it as the stop in the village. There's no prescribed, it's not the dead centre of the polygon that you create, because you can create a weird shape around a village. Because it is just a zone, and we're saying that, if you phone, you can book this bus, go to your bus stop, and it can represent multiples of bus stops if it's a zone. So yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's a really good one as well to consider. And then the last one I've got here is, shouldn't every street be available as an unmarked potential hail and ride unless confirmed as a marked street stop? Ben, can you help me get my head around this one? I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm just having a bit of trouble visualizing it.
Yeah, it relates nicely to the last one, but also it will highlight my inexperience in it. So my understanding is, for a demand response, a demand response service can run anywhere you demand it, and it will come, and anywhere can be so in the case of a village, like drawing a polygon around a village, I would expect that anywhere in that village could be a hail and ride point. You would book it, and then you'd step outside your house and hail it down, and so I'm not sure.
Well, that's what you'd call a taxi service then. It's difficult when you're booking on demand transport. So otherwise, drivers could be driving around every street and stopping, every couple of 100 meters to pick up all the people on that one street. So flexible zones, yes, they are flexible in that sense, but you wouldn't expect a bus to pick up everybody from their door and drop to door. It's not a door to door service. It's still a corner to corner or point to point service.
So Tricia, can you help those of us who live in London, so have no clue of these flex services? Could you help me understand how they work? How, if I'm Beryl and I'm wanting to catch a bus and it's listed as a flex, how would I do that?
Well, we are actually launching our first book a bus by app. It's like going to be Uber Bus, and it's quite a pain. But what we try to do is not create it as a taxi service, but call it we call it corner to corner or stop to stop. So the passenger will be told via the app that you are booking your trip and make your way to this bus stop because this is the nearest one to your house.
City Mapper did something similar. They did some weird little 2019, they had some weird little I'm going to say Addison Lee sized people carriers, just people carriers, and you could book them. You could book a trip on them. They only held like 6 people, and they did some of the weird cross routes across London, which weren't served by a lot of buses, because some of the buses were still a little bit hub and spoke, and they were doing some of the weird runs between the West End and the city. And you'd book a seat on it, and it would tell you to go to a spot. You'd hop on this little bus. It would then poodle round and drop you off where at another spot. So they stopped at specific spots, but only if somebody was there who had booked it. Is that right?
Yes, that is exactly right.
I now understand what a flex bus is.
Yeah, we're having to create some what we call flexible zones in some tourist attractions, because we're actually using their car parks to be able to drop people off and things like that. So in theory, it is picking up from a point, and the app, or we have current demand responsive where they phone the actual bus company, and the bus company will say, that's great, that's booked, you need to be picked up from here.
Is that discretionary to the company offering it, to make it a little bit easier for their operations to limit their service to bus stops?
Yeah, it is, because what we would do is if somebody had mobility issues that meant that they couldn't get to a bus stop to maybe get to an appointment, we would ask them to go to their local community transport provider who can provide that through their volunteer driver services, and they can offer a more bespoke door-to-door trip.
I suppose the point I'm making is, could I set up a bus company that offers the ability to just pick up and drop off wherever I want? It sounds like the City Mapper example was kind of like that, where I'm less concerned about bus stops. I'm more concerned about picking the passenger up where they want to be picked up and dropping them off where they want to be dropped off. But
that's a traffic commissioner question, that one.
Well dodged there, Trish. I'd almost think you were Trisha. I'd almost think you were a politician there. Just to be clear, and I would possibly need to run back and have a look because it was a while ago, and possibly give City Mapper a call and ask them how they did it. But I believe that they had specific stops set up. Now, whether they were set up inside NaPTAN at the time, I could probably go and try to find them. But I know that they only showed in the City Mapper app. So they would tell me where to go. So I think they were non-NaPTAN stops that they ran just for their services, just to ensure that their little buses went to only specific things. I think it died a death because when I took it, the few times I took it, there was only me on it and there'd been empty ones going past. So it was kind of a bit chatting with the drivers. They didn't actually have any passengers at any point, but they were quite happily driving around all day, because that was what they were paid to do.
Our difference is we're taking away all of the local bus and replacing it with this. So all of the people that would commute into some of our bigger towns won't have their regular commuter bus anymore. They would have to book a trip.
Oh, that's really interesting. And Tricia, because this is a lovely video that's going to go up on YouTube, do you want to give a 2-second or a 20-second advertisement of where this is going to be happening, so people don't kind of contact us saying, where is this magic bus?
I wouldn't, because we're not live with it yet. There's other authorities that are live. So Milton Keynes have the same app. North Yorkshire, I think Teesside do. Hertfordshire. There are a few people using the same company that we're using to launch ours, and theirs is already up and running.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So I'm going to go to Neil and then Roger. I think that was the order that the hands went up, or that's the order I've spotted them anyway.
In terms of the passenger issue with wanting a bearing for a centroid point, it sounds as though they're trying to shoehorn using polygons when they should be using points. So I would think that's a passenger issue as opposed to a NaPTAN issue to me. The way Stagecoach work our demand responsive apps is that we define an area for demand responsive transport as a collection of NaPTAN stops or pseudo stops. So the likes of your City Mapper example, we are going to be running demand responsive for Commonwealth Games, and the stops are going to be not actual bus stops, but they are defined in the app as a pretend bus stop. So the app will direct somebody to walk to, basically like City Mapper, it was corner to corner or block to block. You walk to the nearest block intersection where the bus can stop. So it's not like a taxi that drops you to your home, but it's all point based. It's not polygon based. The apps do understand polygons because you have to. It uses a polygon to say you can get service, but it then defaults to points, whether they're NaPTAN or whether they're pretend made up pseudo NaPTANs. But that's all contained within the app and within the backend database.
That's really good. Thank you, Neil, for that. Roger.
I was just going to make very similar points to Neil. We have the Arriva Click service running up in Swanscombe around Blue Water, which is demand responsive point to point. And it's getting back to that issue of creating every single street or every single corner as a potential unmarked bus stop. they created thousands of points for this relatively small area. Now, Kent is a very large county. We've got 7,800 bus stops, I think, approximately, across the county, counting the unmarked ones in NaPTAN. They were creating a similar number just for Swanscombe. It would end up being nothing but wall-to-wall bus stops, and potentially quite difficult to separate actual bus stops from notional bus stops when you look at them on a map. So that would be my main concern there. And the question, of course, would be for a typical demand responsive service, which would be going from village A to village B, at least in our neck of the woods. You can represent that with either 2 flexible zones or several hundred notional points.
Thank you for that. That sounds really good. I am just going to put a note here in the, and I'm going to change these to green so I can easily spot that they were actions for me. The next one is going to be let's flex, let's have a conversation, let's have a longer convo on it, because it sounds like the flex stops or the flex areas are one of those ones of let's make sure that we're getting them right, and that anyone who's consuming data for more than just one area actually knows what that means, and we're not doing them slightly differently across the landscape. And this is not to say that anyone's doing it wrong. It's saying let's just make sure that we're all doing it kind of mostly the same way to the same principles. Does that sound a reasonable next step for that? Sweet. So Roger, we've dealt with you. Your hand. Is there anything else before we move along?
Jay, we've had an extra ticket, I think.
Oh.
Here, just about the hail and ride being marked. I don't think we talked about this one. I think it was added after we covered that bit.
Yes. Thank you for spotting that. So with some of the hail and ride areas in London, there are some areas that are unmarked because they're a country lane, as far as I can tell, because I've done some Google stalking along it. It's just a country lane, and you can, if you see a bus coming, you just wave your hand and the bus will stop for you. There are some that are within more urban or suburban environments that are a hail and ride area, and to indicate this for people, they've put hail and ride markers on all of the lampposts to let people know that they are within a hail and ride area, and if they wave their hand, the bus stop will stop for them. Now, that is those are therefore a marked hail and ride area, which is really not possible according to the schema, but is possible according to what's on the street. So how do we indicate to Beryl trying to catch the bus how she should catch the bus within this area? And if she sees the things on the posts, she knows she's within the right area. If she's walking on the country lane, the app will tell her she's in the right area. But how do we represent those two things? So yes, it's a marked stop, but it's a hail and ride area, which is in the bit that I've found is a whole kind of small crescent suburban loop that runs around, and the whole thing is hail and ride. Adrian, you also found one, didn't you?
Yeah, there's a bit where I live actually where there's a really weird bus that goes absolutely everywhere. It's called the G1. Any bus with a letter in the name, you're in trouble. But it has a huge stretch which is hail and ride, but has 7 lampposts that everyone knows that's where you catch the bus, and there's a little column plate on the column to tell you to do that. But the literature doesn't tell you. I mean, sorry Gerard, if you're on the call or if you're watching this on the video, the literature just says you can hail it anywhere, but then local knowledge will tell you you have to be at one of these certain points along the route for the bus to actually definitely stop.
Because I think from what you've said, it depends on the bus drivers. Some bus drivers understand you can just wave your arm anywhere, and some bus drivers think you need to be actually at the stops. But yes, the community buses is what is. We've got one around in central London as well that just kind of loops its way around all the back streets and takes forever to do what feels like quite a short journey from point to point. And if you ever catch it, it's never going to be a quick journey. Does that answer that question on the marked hail and ride stops, Mark?
Yeah, it was me who put that second comment on in the yellow box. Well, if it is going to be say well, it's just like my comment there. If there is something marked and you can only get on at them marked points and that's indicated by a lamppost, then it's not. Even if you're saying it's hail and ride as an area, it's not really a hail and ride area if you have to be at a certain lamppost. And if it's not got a proper bus stop plate on it, then I would more put that as a custom stop. In Manchester, we have both these country lanes, the long stretches, which we do have as a hail and ride section, and we do have all the mini estates that go through in in urban areas and stuff. We don't necessarily put anything on a lamppost. It's just more, it's printed out on our paper timetables, and it's the common knowledge of the local people that they know it's going to be a hail and ride area. But yeah.
Yeah, I think this might be one of those ones where it might be interesting to get a couple of different views. So it'd be good to get Gerard to join us and kind of talk about why TfL have done it this way and why Transport for Greater Manchester do the same thing slightly differently, and so that we really get an understanding of what the variability is and what the differences are, and hopefully come to some kind of common solution that works for everybody in their software.
I guess it's trying to get the understanding and people using the correct terminology.
Yeah.
I mean, cross terminology has been used around for ages, especially when it comes to trans exchange, and they say, and you either call something a service and a service number, but then service doesn't necessarily mean the line number, which is what's on the front of a bus. And there's a lot, I have this cross understanding with a lot of operators and stuff a lot of the time, and a lot of other users anyway, but that's digressing. But if people are calling something a hail and ride but actually mean two different things, then are you really using the correct terminology for what you're trying to portray?
And I think this is the conversation that I wanted to kick off, is the street versus the schema, because I think people have looked at what's on the street and tried to figure out what they'll call it on the schema, and so we end up with these slightly different, almost what's the word? I want dialects of NaPTAN around the country. Of in London, a hail and ride looks like this, but in Manchester it looks like this. And the whole idea of NaPTAN was to standardize this stuff. So it's kind of trying to understand how we can get these dialects to be a little bit closer.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying a hail and ride can't have something written up on a lamppost. If you're just indicating on a lamppost that this whole road you can hail and ride a bus anywhere, then do you really need to have a different coding for it within NaPTAN? Because just because there's a sign on a lamppost and it says this is a hail and ride area, that's great. It's actually telling general public who don't know you can catch the bus here. But if it's to be something saying this is a hail and ride, but you must be at this lamppost, then that's not really a hail and ride area. That's more, this is a custom stop and you should be getting on here. That's
totally
my
get
understanding.
Yeah, I totally get you, Mark, and this is why I think it's important to have that discussion also with some of the bus operators, because it may very well be there's been communications and understandings that have just become local. And that's why I talk about it as a dialect of, like, it's just become that one of the bus drivers said, oh no, I don't stop anywhere unless it's at one of the posts. And
Okay.
That's just become the dialect for that particular route. Whereas it should be just wave your hand and the bus will stop when you want it to stop.
I mean, the main difference, the only real difference actually in NaPTAN itself with the whole thing is a hail and ride will have a start and an end point of coordinates, which now end data users, end data consumers, could indicate, oh well, this is the start and end point of this road of where this hail and ride is, and could actually highlight it on the have the tell journey planners onto a map to say, you can get on anywhere on here. I don't know, but whereas a custom stop is just one specific set of coordinates. And this is exactly where you get.
Yeah. And I think
standardization will be interesting for timetables data as well, and for journey planners to make sure that they accurately enable journeys to be connected together sensibly. Where it's a street, it's a street, not just a point on one end of that street.
I think it's worth, Jay, I think there's probably another one or more sessions on this, because I think currently some software providers are struggling to deal with those stops that don't accurately match this and might not be including some stops in their outputs. So there is something that we need to get right in this space.
Absolutely, and that's why
You
I
know,
was like,
sorry, go on.
oh, I was just going to say, Mark, that's why I think we need to have a focused discussion on Hail and Ride. I want to move us on to the next point, so I give Adrian some time to talk about the roadmap.
I just want to make one comment in that bit where you said about some data consumers aren't using them properly. We've come across some end providers that only show a bus stop on a map if it's got a NaPTAN code. Again, this goes down into what people call something, because that's kind of the NaPTAN code is the SMS code, which is on a printed physical bus stop. Now, all our Hail and Ride and our custom stops, we don't have a NaPTAN code, and they have an ATCO code, which is the unique identifier, but they won't have a NaPTAN code, which is the SMS code. Now, some end users, because NaPTAN is a schema and then there's a field called NaPTAN code, they're only putting in NaPTAN code into the software. That's where some have been missing out many stops like this.
I think that's a really good point, Mark, and that nicely brings us on to the next one. But I think it also highlights one of the problems that we've got of the producers and the consumers aren't quite aligned in some ways as to what we're trying to represent, what we're trying to say, and how it should be used. And that's one of the things Katrina and I are working on, is trying to create something that tells people this is what a stop is, this is what this field means, this is what this field means, in a really simple 30-second video or so, or quick document, just so that people have an understanding of this, because it's not simple when you look at the schema or the CSV file to make sense of some of the stuff. This is why the little book of bus stops is still one of the ideas that I'm sketching out, of trying to draw bus stops and putting diagrams of, it's got this, it means it's this, it's got this, it's got this. Anyway, what I want to tackle, and I'm just going to take 10 minutes to tackle this, is what should win, street or schema. So if there is a conflict between what's on the street, what I see as Beryl catching my bus, and what I see on my app as Beryl catching the bus based on the schema, which should win? And I just want you to take like 30 seconds. I'm just going to throw up a 30 or a minute timer, and I want you to put down which should win. So if you're a data producer, put them on the left. If you're a data consumer, put your answers on the right. If you do both, throw an answer in both of them, but let me know which should win. And I am just going to start a timer for a minute. So quickly put up what you think should be shown. What's the most important? And Adrian said that you and I don't get a say in this. Okay, hopefully everyone's finished writing. I'll give you another couple of seconds just to finish off the bits that you're writing, and let Adrian's screen catch up with us. There we are. Let me go back and have a read through. So, schema should allow accurate reflection of what is on the street. That's what we're after. That's what we would like. But if the schema and the street don't match for whatever reason, which one should win? Who wrote that one? And can you tell me which one you think should win? Okay. I'll wait and somebody will come back to me on that one. So we've got another one, street. What is actually happening on the ground has to trump the schema when there is a conflict. The next one says street. The customer is always right. We've got 2 more streets. And then we've got, and I need to zoom in because I'll just go to mine and read it. I'm managing to make the schema reflect the street OK Manchester and haven't come across any conflicts. So the person who wrote schema should allow accurate reflection of what's on the street. When there's a conflict, which one should win?
Sorry, that was me. Sorry, it's Aidan from Omnibus. Well, as a software producer, I would say schema, because we have to write software that has rules. As a person, I would say the street wins.
And this is where I think we need to have a process or have something that allows us to find these bits where it's not quite working and figure out what it should be and how we should reflect these and agree on a way forward is where I'm thinking, and hopefully that's not a million miles away from where we're all thinking. Let me just move your one. I'm just going to move that across to consumers because you were Omnibus is a little bit more of a consumer than a producer, but I'm also going to say street should win for customers, which I think summarizes what you said.
Yeah, I'd say so, yeah.
Cool. Let me scroll across. So consumers say street, but this should be accurately reflected in the schema where possible. I'm going to put in where possible. Schema should allow accurate reflection of what's on the street. Let's get the schema right so it can reflect what's on the street. Schema, as you don't know what is on the street unless you're on the street. So there is still, we do need to get the schema right because I know it's so important to making the apps work and to reflect what's on the street, but we need to figure out a process when things don't match. How do we do this? Do we create a little working group? Do we have a bit of a forum? How should we do this? Now, I'm not going to attempt to solve that today because that's a big problem. I'm now going to hand off to Adrian and give him about half an hour to talk through the roadmap with Adrian and Sarah, and then we're going to come back and do some feedback. We'll leave out the how do we manage this because it's a bit bigger. It's a bit of a big thing, and I think I need to go away and think about it as a service designer and come back to you with some ideas, and then we'll talk through and figure out the best ways forward. Does that sound a good thing to do?
It sounds really good, Jay. I think we've been skirting around some of these conversations for a long time, but you've opened up the can of worms now.
The can of worms is out there. There are many worms.
And we need to start tackling it. Because it'll make it. Hopefully, we can make a big improvement that works for everybody, so that we can accurately reflect what's on the street without breaking everyone's systems at the same time. In terms of the roadmap, before we go deep into the roadmap, Sarah was just going to give a quick update on where we are with the Ito World tool, because that's coming to an end in June. It's obviously quite an old bit of kit, and Ito have said they can't really support it past that point because it's a bit of a security risk because it's so old. But Sarah's working on the replacement, so over to you, Sarah.
Hi, good afternoon. So Sarah Ardley here, just to note my position again, Department for Transport, Head of Data Management. So you will be aware that there's been some communications about the Ito World tool and its decompositioning, and that it will be coming to an end in the summer. We are internally working in-house on a replacement for this, and so technically, not that everyone here might not want to know the technical sort of details, but it'll be coded in R, and it will be a web page. This has been attempted before with DFT, but it wasn't in a user-friendly way. So we've kind of looked at the reviews, looked at how that was used, and looked at how we can improve that. The new features with this is, of course, the maps and things like that will be a little bit more up to date than the Ito World one was. We'll have more control over the content of the page because it'll be an in-house tool. And of course, we're always looking for user feedback as well. So it'll be iterated on. it'll be put out there for users to feedback on and give their opinions, and then we can iterate some more on that as well. Just in terms of timelines, we've said like sort of the summer as Ito World tool will cease to exist. There will be a small gap due to the onboarding of people working on the tool for the collaboration and development. And then we'll put it back out there for people to be able to utilize. So it'll be communicated to you every step of the way as we go along. And also, if you are interested and would like to be part of testing it, please get in touch. And we will be doing a session before we finalize the tool. At the moment, we're just starting at the bare bones of what we already have and looking at the functionality of that. But we will be looking to have people's opinions along the way. So we will be setting up some sessions on that in the next couple of months. So watch out for that, and I'll be in touch. And just obviously want to take some questions on that as well. I see a couple of hands that have gone up. At the moment, you see Keith.
Hi, it was just a question as to who will that tool be available to? I understand the Ito one was only available to local authorities in the past, but will it be open to anyone that wants to use it for any particular reason?
Yes, it should be open source. So yeah, that's what the aim is at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you.
Brill.
Is there any more questions on that, or any thoughts that people might have? Mark.
Himself off me. I know on the Ito World tool, there was an option for people to flag up warnings where they've spotted errors and stuff like that with some NaPTAN points, which will highlight to the relevant local authority to be able to fix stuff. If this is going to be sort of quite open source where consumers and all that can use it, will they be able to flag up warnings that for anything that might be incorrect with a certain point that will flag up to the local authority in charge of that NaPTAN area?
Yeah, I think we definitely need to capture that and have a think on it, because obviously we don't want people to be bombarded with questions. So yes, but I just need to have a look at how we manage that basically. And maybe there might be some sort of access point as well. We're not fully decided, but maybe it might be a different sort of access for people to report on. But yeah, hopefully that functionality will build in.
Yeah, because us in Manchester, we've always been quite sort of proactive with especially operators and stuff when they said, "Oh, your coordinates for this stop are quite slightly out," which is affecting the real-time systems and stuff like that. And we're always looking to update us, or out of the 15,000 bus stops that we have, we can't keep up with how many pubs are shutting and stuff like that if we've had a pub name. So we're always keen to really try and keep our data on top of our data. So as much information as we can get fed back to us is great.
Sure. So is most of your feedback then coming from, you're saying, companies, or?
Well, it's either our on-street team who go out. Well, I mean, in-house we've got some of our people who go out putting the timetables up on the bus stops, but yeah, we do get operators feeding back to us. Occasionally, it might come through Twitter feeds where some customers might point back and stuff. But yeah, if there is any, especially data consumers who can say, "Oh, well, something's not quite right with this," or your coordinates don't seem quite right with this, they seem a bit far away from a bus stop, or the name's not right, pub shut, whatever,
Yeah.
And if we can get anyone like that, it'll be great.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I definitely keep you in mind, Mark, in terms of, if we when we want people to test this and to calculate ideas, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem.
I see another hand, Roger.
Hi, just wondering what sort of gap in provision we're anticipating between the old system shutting down and the new one coming online, or we're not anticipating a gap?
We are anticipating a gap. There will be a gap, so it's probably a couple of months.
Okay, thank you.
Cool.
Any more questions? I'll be in touch with any future sort of correspondence with this as well.
Thanks, Sarah. It's really good to hear from you on that, and it's really good to hear we're finally replacing it. It's been a thing lurking around for a little while. So wanted to do just a quick recap on roadmap, primarily just to let you know where we are with things, and just to give people a chance to have a bit of an input into where we take NaPTAN forward this year, and just to really sort of get the message that we've spent some money and some time rebuilding the NaPTAN service and redeveloping it, and we're going to continue to improve on the service and do more work. So we're recruiting some more staff into DFT to work on NaPTAN on a permanent basis. So Sarah is one of those who will be sort of looking after NaPTAN on a permanent basis, and so we'll have a permanent development team, able to sort of in-house development team who are constantly going to be developing NaPTAN. And so I think in the past we've sort of left it for quite a while and not really touched things. And I just wanted to make sure that people are aware that we are continually developing this, and just signal that there will be work to do. I think things that we're going to do will impact on perhaps software companies. Sorry, Aidan, but we're going to be improving and changing things, and that will mean changes to systems. Well, obviously we hope that we give everyone fair warning of when things are happening, but just wanted to signal that this is going to be an area that we focus on in the next few years, just because of how important we think it is. So I've been through this a few times a long time ago. I don't know if anyone remembers it, but this is our sort of long-term vision for NaPTAN. And just to summarize it very quickly, what we hope for in the future, and maybe it won't be 2025, but when we put this together, that seemed like a long way off. It's a little bit closer these days. But ideally, when our data producers are making amendments to their own systems potentially, or making changes to their NaPTAN data, that those changes can be fed through to the ecosystem, to the data consumers, without all the sort of upload and download that currently happens. This can be done automatically, so that the data is always as fresh as it can be, without human beings having to interact with it. And actually, maybe there's some error corrections that could happen in the DFT space, so that if we change something in NaPTAN that causes an error in bods, that we're notified automatically without there having to be a post-mortem or an inquiry after to see what happened, so that these systems are working in sync, to the benefit of everybody that's involved in this space, we hope. So that is our long-term view, and we still are aiming towards that. I'm going backwards on the roadmap, by the way, in case anyone hadn't guessed. So we're going long-term, medium-term, then short-term. So in the medium-term, you may have been aware, we've put out a tender for someone to come and help do a discovery with us, which will be to look at the future of NaPTAN. That's what we've called it. It's quite a grand title, but what we mean by that is some of the things that we picked up today, but actually some bigger things around how we might want to change the schema in the future. Are we looking at going to 2.5, or has the landscape changed significantly that we don't think now that is the right thing to do? I think currently most people are using schema versions 2.1, 2.2 and 2.4. So how do we coordinate everybody and move them in the future in a certain direction to enable new and exciting things to happen? So can we get accessibility data into NaPTAN? The rail team are currently doing 2,500 station audits. Be great if that data was available in NaPTAN, or there was some link to it at least, so that the data sets are linked up. Supporting dual languages, or not just Welsh, but any other languages that are appropriate for us to support, adding new transport modes. All these things require a change to the schema, which will probably be quite traumatic. We haven't successfully changed the schema in more than 10 years. So this is sort of medium-term work that will take careful planning and lots of involvement of this group, and thought will go into it. But we are doing that initial sort of discovery for 6 to 8 weeks in the sort of June to July period, just to get a sense of what sort of direction we think we need to do, and can we really tackle all of these things that we've been flagging. These are the things that we think we can't really do anything without changing the schema, and so those are the main things that will be focused on in that piece of work. I don't think we'll solve many of them in the 6 to 8 weeks that we'll be doing the discovery, but we'll certainly get an idea of the direction of travel, and we can come back and report to this group once we've done that work. So that is the medium term, and that's what we're parking all the difficult things. And so in the short term, just a bit of an update on what we're working on. So our main goal has always been that we want to replace the old NaPTAN technology, all the technology that's sort of supporting the old NaPTAN. So I was just checking the comments, just making sure it wasn't a question. Because the service is really old and is a bit of a security concern and is quite flaky. You might have seen us take the system down occasionally just accidentally by changing content on the page. It's that sort of has that level of non-robustness. So in terms of the work that we've been doing, we've been methodically going through and looking at it's creating an upload. We've done the work on download, sorry, and we've got that working. Obviously, people are using that at the moment. We're focusing on upload at the moment, and in the next couple of weeks, we'll be going out with a group of around 9 data producers to see if they can upload data into the new NaPTAN service. And once we've got that working to a reasonable standard, we'll have an assessment, and then hopefully that will go into public beta so that we can mature out this service and expand it out to all of the users. Everybody will have to get a new account, so sorry about that, but that'll just be for the local transport authorities that need to upload data into NaPTAN. And we'll do a lot of work to hopefully get that into a really nice state, which will allow us to close down the old upload service, and that will represent a significant part of replacing the old NaPTAN service. We also at that point will take a decision about whether we copy and move a lot of the XSD and the schema files, because they've stayed where they've been for the last 20 years, I think, and we might be able to at that point remove the beta tag from the URL that we're using at the moment. So if you've seen our website at the moment, it says beta NaPTAN, and at that point we might change that to just NaPTAN, which would be great, but will obviously mean a slight system change for some of you, certainly for the software providers. So just flagging that in sort of September time, August, September time, we might aim I'd like to be aiming to be doing that. So alongside the work on the upload service, we're also looking at NPTG. And so we're currently working on that at the moment. We're doing some research, we're doing wireframes, a bit of testing, and we've spoken to a few of you about how you use NPTG. If you're keen to get involved, always drop me a line and I will certainly put you in touch with the researchers if you've got particular things to say about upload or NPTG. And what we're planning to do with NPTG, because of where things are and because of the fact that it doesn't change as often as NaPTAN, there's less activity in that space. What we're looking to do is to recreate the download on our new platform so that we can close the old download service down, and then we'll look at creating a new process to add or edit to NPTG that might initially be more like the centrally managed stops that we're doing at the moment, so taking a more central control of that, just because we are concerned that there hasn't been a sort of central oversight over that data set for quite a while, and I'm not sure it's grown in the best way possible, but also it will give us a bit more time to focus on some other things. So we're thinking about creating a more manual process for this, so that you'll be able to request changes to be made, and then we will make them into the data set for you. Not 100% confirmed on that, but that's I think what we're looking to do, just so that we can get everything that we want to be done by September, so that at the end of the summer, by the end of August, early September, we can decommission all of the old stuff that NaPTAN was using, all the old servers and technology, close all the old websites that we don't need. We've got a duplicate there. And in terms of my goal, when I set out working on this 2 years ago, replacing old NaPTAN will be done, and they will have a new NaPTAN service that is able to be changed easily, it's extensible, it's fit for the future, it's built on modern technology, it's going to be secure, it's going to be robust, it's going to be maintainable, and hopefully you will notice the changes in terms of speed of uploads and ability for us to less downtime and less things that go wrong with the service, and our ability to fix things a little bit quicker. And we expect that to take us up to about August this year. I'm going to pause there for any questions. Hopefully that made sense, and hopefully none of that came as a big shock to anybody, because that's roughly what we've been saying along the way, but just hoping to firm that up a little bit. Jay?
I was just going to say, so while people are thinking about questions, what I'd like to do is give people a couple of minutes just to read through the roadmap and put any stickies, like putting a +1 or a thumbs up icon or something where you see something that you particularly like, put some thumbs down or some, oh my God, please don't touch this. We possibly will have to take that under advisement as to whether or not we have to touch it, but just give us a sense of how you're feeling around some of these themes. So I'm going to just set up a timer for 2 minutes and just give you 2 minutes to throw some thoughts against the roadmap. If there's things that you're like, yeah, this is brilliant, please do this, throw some +1s there. If there's things where you're like, this is terrifying me, just let us know, because then we can start to talk to you about it and really, really understand. So we're building this based on all of the stuff that we've learned over the last almost 2 years that Adrian and I have been talking to you all, really trying to understand what's going to work for you and understand the scary bits, because we don't want to scare you. We want to do this together.
And once we've done that, we'll go on to the final bit of the roadmap, which is just to talk about what we're going to do after September, because we've got lots of things that we could do, and we're really keen to get your thoughts on what would be the most important thing for you.
Is that Horizon 2, Adrian?
Let me just go. This is, what do you want us to work on next?
Would you like me to set up a quick voting session for that?
Well, I was going to do it, but you, if you want to do it, that would be super. Yeah, I was thinking 1 vote per person, but I did wonder whether we might have to have 2, just in the interest of kindness, because it's difficult to choose.
I would give people 2 votes per session, 2 votes per. I'm just going to set up the voting. I'm just setting that up now. While the timer, and you can read through anyone's notes. Yep, spell favorite correctly.
Okay, we haven't got huge amounts of notes, Jay. I'm going to
we don't have huge amounts of notes. Means none.
I wasn't sure how to vote on them then.
No, it's okay. We'll do the voting now, I think. Jay's hijacked my session and confused things slightly, because that's her job. That's their job. Sorry, oh, blimey. And okay, so in terms of those, we're hoping that we're going to have stuff replaced by September, and we can start to think about, well, what's next. Some of these things we'd hoped to have done a bit earlier, but as things go, it's some stuff's taken a bit more time. But the things that we're looking at doing are building a 900 stop editor for local authorities, so that we don't have to have quite so many centrally managed stops. They could be managed by the local authorities themselves. This certainly would help, I think, some of the bigger areas like Manchester and London that have quite a lot of changes to centrally managed stops. There's sort of tram stops, ferry stops, etc., underground stops. We had to put all the Elizabeth line stops in London recently, and we're not always as efficient as we could be at putting them in, unfortunately. So I think having authority to do that yourself would be really helpful. So that could be something that we look to work on next. And then with the all stops editor, I know a lot of people use NaPTAN, use transport software from certain companies to manage their stops, so they don't want to edit directly into NaPTAN. But I think if we do create the ability to edit centrally managed stops, we would probably inadvertently create functionality that could be applied to all of NaPTAN. So for the few authorities that are managing this by editing an XML file themselves, we could open up the ability to make the edits straight into NaPTAN without having to use any sort of intermediate software. So that could be something that we work on. I know it's not everyone's thing, but I do understand it would be helpful for some of our user base. And then in terms of data quality, we've talked about stop archiving. We're not really doing that at the moment, so there's no accurate way to delete stops in NaPTAN and prevent the misuse or reuse of ATCO codes. So that's something that is quite important. And all of these things we'd like to think we would do, but this is just a question of the prioritization or the order in which we do things. And so we also got business rules that we have used, and we've had warnings in the past. I think the thinking here is we could do some work to change the business rules, to discard any that aren't any use, potentially put some of the business rules into actual validation rather than warnings because they're really valuable, and look at creating new business rules that are more useful based on what we learn. Certainly from things that come into the support desk around incorrect data, we could look at putting business rules in based on that history. Some of that would mean changes to how things work, but in the long run, that would obviously be quite important. I think Sarah's very keen that we have some good business rules to make sure we have high quality data in NaPTAN. So that's something that we could certainly look at. On the old service, there's an XML validator that allows you to check whether your XML file is valid. I personally don't think we need this anymore, because on the new service, if you put a file into NaPTAN, it will validate it certainly in around a minute or probably less than that. And so you won't need to I think just put it into the system. You don't need to test it, just put it in. I think in the old days, if you put it into the system, you wouldn't find out everything about it until the next day, but we turn it around in a very short time now. So that's something that we could work on. We also have a data quality ISO standards idea, so the idea of doing some sort of reviews, technical review of the data quality to provide you with some sort of quantitative feedback on the quality of the data and to do some work in that space. I'm just going to move this sticky to the left a little bit, if that's okay. And then the lat long conversions. So we've talked about this in previous meetings. We don't currently always put out latitude and longitude. We always put out eastings and northings, and we just provide the lat long if it's been provided to us by local authorities. There has been some calls for us to do a standard translation and just to put our data into NaPTAN. We're still discussing that internally. We have different views in the team, if I'm honest, about whether we should do this or not. And so it'd be great if that's the most important thing for you when we open up the voting in 2 seconds. If you could vote on that, then that'll give us that useful stay that this is still a useful thing. I do question the fact that because we didn't do it in January, whether it's now is probably possibly too late. Like you've come up with other solutions in the interim, but it'd be good to hear from you on that, either in the voting or if you put your hand up. And then NPTG data quality. It was a real eye-opening session we had on data quality on NPTG the other week or last month. I don't think I'd understood the issues that are faced there, and there's a question there around: do we just spend some time tidying up NPTG in conjunction with everyone, just to make sure that it is really as accurate as it could be, delete some of the older records that perhaps aren't needed anymore and are flagged as inactive. And we could look at introducing the feedback mechanism for reporting an issue for a stop and open that up to the public, perhaps to shared inboxes at local authorities and at DFT. So there's some ideas that we haven't explored fully yet, but we were conscious that those are things that people had mentioned at certain times and might be interested in. 4 more to go. So on the website, we haven't replaced all the 17 CSV files that used to be created. We've just put out stop CSV, and there's been a couple of requests for rail references and stops in areas, but we think that all the information that is in there is in the XML file, and we haven't had any requests recently for the files to be recreated. It could be something that we do, but obviously, it comes down to prioritization. Do people really need that? Are there other things that are more important right now? So it'd be good to get your state on that. The API, at some point in the future, but maybe not now, we want the API just to give you what's changed from last time that you downloaded something, rather than just giving you this huge, enormous file if you're downloading the national file. And similarly, in the future, linking back to the strategy, actually, as soon as something changes, can it just be fed over to you without having to wait for you to actually do your nightly download, etc. And then finally, we're touching the schema in the future of NaPTAN work, but I think there could be a decision made earlier to just withdraw 2.5 schema. I feel like we're not going to be heading in that direction for a variety of different reasons, and that could be something that we tidy up and make clear to people. So those are the things that we think we ought to be working on. If there's anything else that people think we need to be doing, then please do chuck that on the sticky. And I'm just going to tidy up the little board. Hopefully I've explained what that one meant around the all stops editor. I'm just going to make this a bit bigger so I can see it. There is a technical limitation on allowing LAs to change the 900 file now, just because of how historically it was set up. So it's all in one file. So if people made changes to just the stops in Manchester, for example, it would potentially delete all the other stops across the country. And there isn't an easy way for us to allow access to editing that, and so we would need to build something that could handle numbers of different regions editing the stops in those areas. So that is something that we sort of inherited from the old NaPTAN service. Jay, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you've covered everything. I can't think. I'm just having a quick think. I know that whatever we create for editing the 9x stops, for editing those central managed rail stops, will also mean that there is the possibility of having a very simple lightweight editor for the people who are currently using some homebrews, or struggling to put stuff into XMLs, or just not providing the file forever. So that's kind of like, it's almost a freebie if we do the other one. But it's, do we put it out? Do we push it out to people? How do we control it? What I'm going to do is I'm going to press on now. I've set it up so you should only be able to vote on the different ideas. You've got 2 votes for your 2 favorite ideas. Now, if you vote on something, you can vote on something twice. You can also, if you vote on something wrong, you can, I think it's option click or shift click, it will tell you, and you can remove a vote and put it on something else. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes, because it's 2 choices. I'll just press on start. There we go, and begin voting. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to kind of think about what you want to vote for. And then we'll have a look and see what comes up, and we'll answer any questions.
And I will refrain from the temptation to vote, because I have a clear favourite, but I won't divulge that at this moment.
You could also stop sharing and then reshare when the voting is done, if you wanted.
Yes, let's do that.
And I see that there's Neil's put in a really good point about the Howland ride segments polygons, so that's really interesting. The other 2 pieces that I put in the chat, just to let you all know, there's only 15% of you are now producing 2.4 and putting them into NaPTAN. That might have changed slightly in the last month, but I haven't gone back and double checked. And for MPTG, for NubTig, there's less than 30 changes per month on average, compared with several thousand for NaPTAN. So it's so much less, and that's why Adrian and everyone is kind of looking at doing a manual piece. And I just wanted to give you an idea of the volumes so that you weren't thinking, oh my God, you're going to be overwhelmed. When I say less than 30, I think it's less than 6 in some months. So it's been incredibly low, but less than 30 is kind of a budgetable amount that we know we're not going to exceed massively.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? We could work on that now, but maybe you'd prefer there's something else that's a real burning thing that you need us to do, and so we could, it's a question of priorities, isn't it?
So there's a few people left. Me and Adrian aren't going to vote. There's a couple of people who are still quickly voting, so do your best to throw your votes up. If you don't vote, you don't got to say. And I'm just going to end the voting session. We've got a couple. Okay, visiting sheep. I'll wait till you've done your second vote. And you can vote for the same thing twice as well, by the way, if you really want to push something. So I will end the voting session and see how we go. So, Adrian, if you want to share yours, I'll read it through. So the lat long, hopefully you see the voting results. Yes, excellent. So the latitude longitude conversion got 5 votes. And then for 3 votes, we've got MPTG data quality, the 9x stop editors, and applying some business rules. So is there any, with those 4 being the top 4, is there anyone who's like, actually, I want to change my vote, or I think there's a problem with that for the top 4? Cool. And then moving down to the ones with only 2 votes.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I can still read it. We've got tidy up the schema, withdraw 2.5. All stops editor, edit your data without file uploads. Report an issue with a stop, and archiving, permanent deletion. So just so that you're all aware, I think it's the next session that we're going to run in next month in May is going to be about archiving and deleting. So Lucy and myself have been working on what a flow might look like for this, and we want to bring that to you and give you an idea of what archiving and deleting could look like. So is there any questions or any thoughts on the roadmap and that voting session? Anything that's
I'd be interested to hear from the people that voted for lat long conversions. Is there anything particular that's causing you an issue at the moment, or just a bit of the rationale, just so we understand what's behind the decision on that one?
Roger.
Yeah, we're data consumers as well as data producers. We have a map that we've produced in-house that cross-references NaPTAN with the route and timetable data. I've got a script that just crawls the ATCO CIF file to link the 2 together. Without lat long, the actual maths to produce that is fairly tortuous, actually. It's not a straightforward thing. So the lat long conversion is something that's very useful to us. Now we've got various in-house tools, but to be honest with you, it's proving to be problematic to link those lists across to each other correctly. So that's why, essentially. Mm-hmm. Also, there's only one authority in the area that we consume data for that doesn't, but it's TfL.
No comment.
Yeah.
And is there? I mean, I'm pushing my luck here a little bit because I think Jay wants the session back. But is there anybody that's providing lat longs at the moment that would be hugely upset if we overwrote the data with our own conversion based on the Easterners and Northerns that they'd provided? Mark, I'm looking at you, I think, when I'm asking this question.
And I can see Trisha's about to speak as well.
I'll let Mark go first.
Yeah, I think ideally for the best part for all parties all around would be, one centrally converted set to make sure that different people aren't doing different conversions or they've typed in the calculations wrong and stuff like that.
And Trisha?
As long as they're right,
Yeah. We'd have to see. I think do some testing to see how much I have run something to see how much we're going to change people's stops in terms of distance moving them if we do a central conversion, and there are some quite significant changes for some stops. So it's not a straightforward thing. There would be some. We'd have to have a look at who was affected by that, whether it was just one area that we could talk to.
I mean, it could be whether some people's data sets, if they have got Easterns and Northerns and lat long in it, whether they've maybe from some legacy systems, the coordinates are still wrong within them.
Yeah.
I mean, I know our original bus stop tool was just, an old 1986 program that was manually keyed in for everything. So
okay.
So whether when it was all imported across into our new NaPTAN tool, whether they just took all coordinates that were from both systems, blanket as they were, or whether it just took one set to make a nice, neat conversion, I don't know. But that was a bit before my arrival here.
Cool. And Tricia? Sorry.
Well, our system, I can actually put lat longs or eastings and northings in, and it automatically converts whichever one I put in. Our actual eastings and northings, we can actually go down to 8 character eastings and northings, so we can get quite precise. So I wouldn't like my lat longs overwriting, especially because we've done a load of bus stop surveys and actually gone out with tablets with our surveyors and actually stood there and got the GPS coordinates of the stops, and then are importing it directly from actual physical data that's been collected on site.
So what I'm hearing is, not committing to this, but ideally the ideal scenario is that we're providing them, but we are not overwriting data that people have provided us, which does leave us in a bit of a complicated picture. So we'll have to give that a bit more thought and think about how we want to tackle that.
And I also think I did a little bit of what Adrian did as well, just doing some quick checks, and even ones that looked close were a couple of decimal points out. So it all of them will be slightly different. So it comes down to how much difference is enough difference to flag something. So I think there's quite a lot of thinking that we need to put into this. It's more than just a quick bodge fix. Not to say that the previous one was a bodge fix, but the previous system did overwrite data. It did push data in, so the data provided and the data put out could be quite different for some local authorities, and we know that this caused some issues with BODs, where BODs were reading the latitude, longitude, not the eastings, northings for some stops, and there were bus stops. There were contentious bus stops that took a while to sort out. Keith?
Oh, sorry, no, it's about editors. Did you say whether or not you've currently got an editor to do your 9x stops, or you've got to actually create the editor to do your 9x stops at the first point, and then that you had to do it in reality? So therefore, if you were doing for that, you would do an editor for all stops and make that available to everybody. That's my understood without the ifs and buts, because you've got to do it, so you're going to do that once you've done that regardless.
So we haven't got anything at the moment. So when we do centrally managed stop changes, we are hacking a XML file manually, which is not great. So ultimately, at some point, we will look to do something that helps our team edit centrally managed stops. That could be step one in the process, so that when we get a request in to move a centrally managed stop, we could just edit it in a user interface rather than having to edit XML files directly. And so that is one thing that we may do. We've got some clear indications that other things are more important. So in terms of priorities, that might not be something that we do straight away. It depends on the amount of work, the amount of work that we get through centrally managed stops. But secondly, and this is something that was a bit more popular by the looks of things, we've always said that we want to decentralize the centrally managed stops, because we don't think we should be the people that have to edit data for MARC and for TFL and for areas that have got tube stations just because they're tube stations. We'd rather that the authorities could do that themselves, because they'll do it better, and it's quicker and it's easier for them rather than having to rely on us. And so that we could provide some sort of editing tool that allows them to do that. If we did that, the possibility is that we could reuse some of that thinking and some of that ability to enable some of the authorities that haven't got a contract with Omnibus or whoever to make edits to stops. That's not going to be a nice thing. It's going to be manually editing each stop, but it's possibly better than bodging it on an XML file, which is what some people are having to do at the moment. So those are the sort of 3 stages that we might go through if we were looking at doing something like that.
What do you mean it's not going to be a nice thing? You've still got to manually edit the fields on each stop regardless. I didn't quite get.
Well, I imagine if we ask people to change a record slightly, we've got. I'll think of a good example. If we ask people to add in a new field to a data set, if you've got to do it on a manual editor that we've made, you'd have to do that 7,000 times for each bus stop that you own. So it was not going to be some sort of. I haven't had a big use of the transport systems out there, but I'm pretty sure that you can do that a lot quicker on a bespoke system like Omnibus or Trapeze. So we're not talking about any sort of funky tool here, but just a way to open up a stop and make a change to it on a browser rather than having to go into. I mean, I won't name the person, but I had to help somebody edit an XML file and change their admin area reference, and so I had to go in and find and replace in an XML file and change one number to another number about 50 times so that their file was accurate, and that's because they haven't got any technology to help them, and we were there to do that. So it's trying to avoid certain users from having to do that sort of thing, to provide that minimal level of tooling to help us get better quality data for NaPTAN.
I can only reiterate what I've kind of said before in many cases, but there are systems out there which will do that, which will make it a lot easier for you, even if you came a request and you came to those people and asked them to do it for you rather than manually doing it. And there are systems out there again which will change all the 900 stops globally and could do it by area and could feed back into your master system if it's not going to be a short-term change that you were going to do in the short term.
So Keith, that's a really good point, and there are systems that can do this. We need to look at it. We need to look at what is required, what is needed, and have a look at what the minimal solution is that has all the security, reproducibility, maintainability that is required inside NaPTAN. So we've got
this Bluetooth menu on your mobile device and connect to Jabra Speak 510.
Interesting overlay. So that's kind of what that's kind of why we're looking at it. And we'll build up some ideas of what's needed. Keith, if we've answered your questions, I'd like to go to Mark.
Yeah. I'm just going back on your lat long and all that. Mm-hmm. Would your option be to say if someone provides Easterns and Northern and lat long, you leave it at that? If someone's only provided Easterns and Northern, then you can add it in. If someone's only provided lat long, you can then, in your way, add in the Easterns and Northern, so all the fields are only create something if them fields are blank.
Yeah, I think
so you can respect the source, but still populate yourself if someone hasn't.
I think so, and I think it's just that's probably the most complex way of doing it, and so I think that's probably the way we need to go, but it's just a headache for the development side of things for us to do that. But I feel like realistically, that's the only thing that we could do. I'd feel very nervous about moving a lot of bus stops just because we wanted to do a conversion when somebody who might be using latitude and longitude as their primary way of measuring a stop and providing Easterns and Northerns just for us because we asked for it, and then we suddenly change that. I'd feel very nervous about doing that. So I think that's probably not what we can do. We need to bash it about a little bit and think about how we fit that into the upload process and the sort of cycle. But I take from this meeting that the community is sort of has a preference that is the next thing that we should potentially work on, and we'll feed that in and hopefully you'll hear from us in this soon on how we're going to do that.
And Mark, just to be clear, everyone uploads the Eastings Northings. That seems to be something that everyone is doing it via Eastings Northings, and some people are doing the lat long and some people aren't, and it's making sure that where it's not there, just reiterating, making sure that where the latitude longitude is not provided, then we would need to provide it, or we need to look at how we provide it, not overwriting anything that already exists. Does that seem to be the general census of everybody? I just want to double check before we move on to the feedback section. Everyone seems happy, or nobody screamed at me, so therefore everyone's happy. So just the very last little bit, there's a feedback corner, as always, right over on the far right. So we've got thinking about the schema, the Street versus Schema conversation and the roadmap conversation. If you can have a look and tell me what gave you joy. Just what I'll do is I'll do the very simple thing of just summon everybody to me on Mural because it's power. Give me power. So think about what gave you joy, what was good and useful about this conversation, what frustrated you, what wasn't good or useful about this conversation, and what made you sad, what things were missing, what things should be happening in this conversation. So take a couple of minutes, throw your thoughts up there, and there's also, you can see our contact details for myself and Adrian, and Sarah, I should add yours there as well. Just give me 2 minutes and I will go grab it and put that in there as well so people can also contact you. That was my oversight.
No worries, thank you, Jo.
So I now have to copy email. Bear with me, you're seeing how slow I am at editing still today. No, I need to unlock. There we are. And I'll put Sarah's in the middle. There we are. So now there's 3 of us that you can contact about things, not just myself and Adrian. So there's somebody who's just posted, I really want my full set of CSV files back. Can I ask that person if they could tell me which CSV files they really want back? Because we proved last time that coaches.csv was a waste of time because it hadn't been used since 2007 and hadn't changed since 2008 or something like this. So, sorry, small frustration moment. So, because I had to do a lot of research on that. So if you could let me know what of those CSV files you really, really need, we can start that conversation. And who knew that I had feelings about coach references?
Yes, don't really need coach references. That was my sticky note. Don't really need air references. I get asked all kinds of odd questions where I ended up using these tables and cross-referencing them to get the answer. So I have used things like stops in area. For instance, I've never used locality main access points. That one can go. The flexible and hail and ride tables, if you actually want to represent those on a map, you will need those because the entity that exists within the stops table for those is just the central point. Ferry references, I actually end up mapping. Let's see, do I actually need ferry references? What's in the content here?
And Roger, what I'm because I know that the CSVs are lovely and humanly readable, but I also know that all of the data is in the XML. So are you using the CSV to put data into something, and could you move to the XML? Is kind of a question because it's going to be, I won't say better, but it because it can be delivered via the API and you can strip it down, it's always going to be there because the XML will always be the XML. The XML will always have all of the data within it. Yeah. Whereas the CSV files are summaries, and I'm always nervous of summaries.
The issue that I've run into, yes, we are using it to import data into systems. Unfortunately, those systems are kit bashed, homebrewed, and using whatever technology is available. And one particular frustration, for instance, is that the version of Access we've been using, which is an incredibly useful tool for rapid prototyping. It's a lousy database, but it's great for writing this sort of tool. The version of Access that we have is not aware of attribute tags. So data that's included in the XML but is in an attribute tag, we can't see it. We can only see it within the actual tag itself. So it's things like that where it's there in the XML, but I can't get at it.
Mm.
And yes, it's tied to the limits of the technology that I've got available to me.
That makes sense. Let's have a wider, longer conversation on those CSV files. I'll add it to the list of upcoming meetings. So just as we finish up, the next meeting is in May, so it'll be somewhere in the end of May. I just need to sort out some dates, and it will be on archiving and deleting, and it will also possibly talk about public and private stops. So there'll be a little bit about the status of stops, suspended, and we'll just have a look around the whole thing. But one of the things that we want to bring to you is what we propose is the way that stops could be archived, and then just get your sense as to whether we've gone completely in the wrong direction or this makes sense. And for all the people who were around when this was first tackled a long time ago, we've had some really good conversations with Miles. We've got all of the original requirements for the old system and what the old system was intended to do, and we're going to look at those and make sure what we cover and what we don't, and that archiving is doing the thing that people want it to do. And I know archived and deleted are effectively the wrong way round, and we're just going to have to deal with the fact that NaPTAN uses archived and deleted kind of almost back to front. And I think it's just the age of the language, because deleted came before archived. So we called everything deleted and then discovered that we need to get rid of them. So we called that archived. We might just call them dead and put them into a graveyard. May very well be what we do, but that will be some of what we'll bring to that meeting. Before I go, is there anything else that we want to run through? Get between the end of Ito World and the new tool. So there's lots of agreement there. Let's also keep that conversation going. Good to see about the development, brainstorming the sessions. Good to hear. Right. So thank you, everybody, for your time, for your energy, for your commitment to what is the greatest little database that nobody else has ever heard of, which is what we're constantly selling NaPTAN as. And I will catch you all next time. Feel free to email myself, Adrian, or Sarah if you've got any questions.